Okay, so now we have our finished sculpture, and I'm just going to kind of move this thing around a little bit so you guys can see this side kind of portion that I've made some flat edges on. A lot of things that we talked about in past demonstrations were about letting things stiffen up and getting to a different dryness stage. And right now I'm just going to kind of show you a few other things that you can do to kind of help clean up your object once it dries out a little bit. Because right now this mass, it's going to take quite a while to dry out. I actually left my piece out overnight last night so that it could start to stiffen up. And it stiffened up a little bit, but not a lot. So that's one thing that's really important to understand, is that there's not really any specific time frame that I can give you as to how long it's going to take for your clay to dry out. And so because of that, you're going to have to keep a watchful eye. All right. What you want this item to do is you want this item to get to almost a leather hard stage in terms of here on the outside. So we're going to leave it out like this without the bottom portion of it being exposed. We don't want to turn it around. We don't want to do any of those things, because what we're trying to achieve is we're trying to get this skin, the skin portion, the outside portion of this object, we're trying to get that to get to a specific dryness level, okay? And that's what's kind of going to be important here. Make sure that any of the things, like I only added 2 objects here, this gear and this kind of eyebrow bit. And on those, make sure that those things are scored and slipped. They have to be scored and slipped, otherwise they're not going to stay on. They're going to pop off in the drying process or potentially in the kiln firing. All right, so just be careful of that. One other thing, I don't know if you can tell on the video right now, but I'm going to try and kind of maybe hold this upright like this so you guys can see some of this stuff. I'm not sure if you can see kind of these clay crumbs that are right here. These clay crumbs, I call them crumbs, some people call them boogers. They're little curls that come up as you start doing things. Some of that stuff I carved out, and when I carved it out, it leaves those little clay curls, if you will. And those little clay curls, you do not want to do anything with them until they become dry. You'll actually start to see them get a little bit lighter in color. And as they start to get lighter in color, because they're so small and they're outside or in a different spot than, higher up than the main portion of your piece, or the main mass of your piece. And if you let those stiffen up quite a bit, then you'll be able to just kind of dust them off. And you can even use like a small brush if you want to. I just have a couple of brushes hanging around. Some of them are for painting, some of them are for different things. You can theoretically use anything, even anything you get from like the 99-cent store. It's not anything you have to have a really nice brush for. In terms of cleaning anything up here, I've already started to smooth some stuff out. And if you've got some spots, this is a small sponge. This is a natural sponge, but I gave you guys that sponge in the loaner kit. And that loaner kit has that sponge. You can actually cut it up if you want to. It's no big deal. If you need to get it smaller, sometimes I like to use the smaller pieces of this. And this almost has no water in it. If I were to squeeze this, like, you don't see any drips of water coming out of it. And I keep it in that stage right now to kind of come in here, and I can just very gently start dragging it across the surface of the forehead, and I can start to get rid of any lines. If I have too much water on this sponge, what's going to start happening is that you're going to start dragging around the clay, and then there's also little particles that are in the clay that's known as grog, or some people even, maybe it's sand, if it's a smaller particle. And if you start dragging your sponge around and it's really wet, what's going to happen is you're going to start to move the clay away, and you're going to start to expose the sand or the grog. And so it's going to become really rough looking. It's almost going to have a sandpaper appearance to it. So we don't really want to have that happen. So we use small amounts of just a little bit of water. It's barely damp in this sponge for me to start dragging this thing around. Okay, and that's going to be really helpful maybe for any cleanup. Okay, So if you need to do any kind of last minute cleanup touches, that's fine. If you have any of these curls or anything, don't worry about that. Still submit your finished product, and because we're still going to be working on this object. We got to let this thing dry out and let that skin form. Now, the way that we're going to know that that skin is formed and it's hard enough for us to move on to the next layer or level, or the next step where we're going to start hollowing this object out, is that when I touch this, or if I touch it even with my fingernail, I shouldn't leave a mark. Right now that left a really teeny tiny mark. I'm not sure if you can see it, but there is a little small mark there because this clay is still at what I call the cheese hard stage. Right? We wanted to get to the leather hard stage where it takes a bit of pressure for me to be able to do that and actually put a mark on the clay. Okay? A couple of things to think about with your object too is that we want to make this thing a three-dimensional object, so we want to be able to see that there's some dimension that's there, and that should match or at least come close to the pictures that you took of your face. Okay? That's going to make it look more realistic. It's going to make it look more three-dimensional. That's what we're looking for. So, one thing that I'm not necessarily grading on is I'm not really grading you guys on whether or not it looks like you, okay? That's not a big deal. What I want you to do is try to achieve that. Try and make it look like you if you can. So it's a difficult thing to achieve, and that's why we're in this class, and that's why we're learning how to model using this clay and doing these additive and subtractive techniques. So yeah, we can do that. We can start to clean things up. I can come in with different things like maybe my knife tool or something, or maybe just the edge of something. You guys have a different knife tool than I do. Mine's a little bit smaller. But what I did earlier is I came around the edges and I started to kind of clean up these edges just to kind of make it look nice, right? So it doesn't look like there's little curls of clay. I can get some of that stuff gone. And it's easier for me to do this in this stage when it's at this dryness stage, this kind of cheese hard stage, before it goes into leather hard. Once it becomes leather hard, you can still smooth it out a little bit, but it's a little bit more difficult to do in that stage. So sometimes I'll even use my finger and start using my finger to kind of smash my finger down and get some of those little imperfections out of there. If any of you guys have nails, this is going to be a very difficult thing to achieve. I keep my nails down so that I can actually have the tip of my finger extend out past my nail. And if I do that, then it's a lot easier for me to come in here and manipulate things and get my fingers into cracks and crevices. And if you need to get tools into those cracks and crevices, you can do that as well. The other thing that I want to mention is that once this thing kind of gets to that leather hard stage, that's where we're going to be turning it over, and we're going to start to hollow out the inside and make this about a 3/8 of an inch thick sculpture, all right, as much as we can. It's not going to be an easy task, but we're going to take our time when we do it. This project takes a while, and there's a lot of different aspects to it. While we're sitting and waiting for this object to dry, and to get that skin, that leather hard skin on it so that we can start hollowing it out, what I want you guys to start doing is start thinking about how you're going to be presenting this object. Are there going to be any mixed media elements that are going to be involved in your object? Remember that you still have to have sculpted portions, sculpted elements that are machine made, not just things that you're going to be adding to this object to be machine made. As you can see from the one that I've made here, I didn't do exactly half, and that's fine, right? This is probably about 2/3 of the face is natural, or the regular face, and then the other third is the machine parts, and that's fine, right? What I don't want to have happen is I don't want you to just put one element onto your face and have that be your machine part. I don't want you to have all of the elements that you add to this as machine made. I don't want all of those to be just found objects or actual real objects that you're adding to it as well. So we want to have some aspects of this that are sculpted, and hopefully that was laid out in or you understood that in the instructions for the assignment. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be waiting for this thing to dry out. Most likely first thing Monday, first thing next class period. I will have a video up for you guys to see about how to start hollowing this object out. We want to get it to that correct dryness level, and we want to do some kind of minor tweaks on it to get any of the little imperfections out of there. That's what craftsmanship is going in and getting rid of some of the tooling marks that might be there, making the skin area look nice and smooth so it has the appearance of skin or fleshy kind of a feel. Any of the machine parts should have those hard edges, if you will. If you guys have any questions, this final project is due today at the end of class. So if you have any questions, you can email me. And also, if you make sure you're taking a look at those the student projects that I put up at the very end of the PowerPoint presentation that give you an idea of what other students have done with this project in the past. You can end up, while you're waiting, like we said, start thinking about how you're going to be displaying this object. Start thinking about those extra, machine-made parts that you might be adding as mixed media. Start gathering those sorts of things. Start gathering those so that we're ready to start building our bases and making our bases and putting everything together. All right. We kind of have a little bit of a hurdle, and that is that some of the stuff that I typically am able to do for this project, we don't really have access to that because we don't have access to the studio and the tools that are there. So, we're going to get through it, and everything's going to be, or things are going to be a little bit different, but still look for those, look for things that you could use for your displays. They could be purchased anywhere. It doesn't have to be Home Depot. It can be the 99-cent store. It can be the dollar-only store. It could be things that you have around your house, things that maybe somebody has in the garage at your place or a relative's place or a friend's place. We're not going to be like building things necessarily, but if that's your forte and that's something that you're interested in doing and you have the means to be able to pull something like that off, then go for it, okay? If you want to add some sort of a wooden structure to this, you can do that, all right? So there's not any rules as to how you're going to put these items together. If you remember from one of the student examples you saw, that I posted, the student example was kind of the face as the central element. There were a number of rusty chains and parts of an old table saw that were used, and then this item was mounted on there. So there's those sorts of things is what I'm talking about. These don't have to be, you don't have to go out and buy and get fresh materials. These can be materials that are found objects that are from garage sales, from junkyards, from anywhere, okay? So if you have any questions, please let me know.